An NFL Insider reports the Chicago Bears have a shocking candidate for offensive coordinator. Hi, everyone. I'm Andy here with Chicago Bears React, bringing you all of the Chicago Bears news that you are looking for both during the season and now in the off season. If you wouldn't mind, before we start this video, take a moment, like, subscribe, become a fan of this channel. We're going to be covering the Chicago Bears each and every day this off season and during the season, bringing you all the information from league sources, from the Chicago Bears, beat reports. We're going to be covering all of it. So you want to make sure you're clued into what we're doing, because the Chicago Bears are going to have a lot of activity this offseason. We're talking a lot of cap money. We're talking a lot of draft capital, and we're talking a lot of key decisions that need to be made, including the offensive coordinator, which is something we had talked about yesterday on the channel, that the Chicago Bears were looking to move on from Luke Getsy, and that's exactly what they've done. And so, but they have moved quickly, and I didn't quite anticipate that, because there is a shocking candidate available on the market right now, and that is Shane Waldron, the current offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, normally, when you're looking for an offensive coordinator, you have a couple of options. You can go for what we call a retread, which is somebody who has failed somewhere else but has experience calling plays. For instance, Matt Nagy would be a retread over in Kansas City. Or you could be looking at bringing in somebody with zero experience, such as Luke Getsy when he came into the Chicago Bears, which is a scary proposition because we've just done that. What's rare is finding an offensive play caller who has not lost their job and is somehow available on the market, and that's what's happened with Shane Waldron since the announcement that Pete Carroll is going to be stepping down as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. This is a rare opportunity to bring somebody in who has success as an offensive play caller. And yesterday, Tom Pelissero was the first one, I believe, to break the news that the Chicago Bears have requested an interview with Shane Waldron. So this is pretty interesting. Shane Waldron, for those of you who don't know, has experience coaching underneath Bill Belichick, underneath Sean McVay, and now underneath Pete Carroll. And anytime you're talking about those three coaches, I'm going to get pretty excited, because those are coaches who have not only excelled in the NFL, but they've excelled in different ways. And ultimately, I get a little nervous when you're talking about somebody who has spent all of their time in one system underneath one kind of prominent figure, because ultimately you're likely to get like a Matt Patricia type who's doing the worst possible impression of whatever coach they've learned to emulate. And so I like the fact that Shane has spent time underneath a few of these exceptional coaches. Now, most recently, obviously, he's been in Seattle, but before that, as I mentioned, he was working underneath Bill Belichick. As we can see, he in a variety of capacities over 5 years. He was then with the Washington football team, the Washington Redskins, I guess we'll just say, in 2016 as offensive quality control coach under Sean McVay. And then he followed Sean McVay out to Los Angeles and was a part of that passing, developing that passing attack that turned Jared Goff into quite a formidable quarterback. But the thing that caught a lot of people's attention is what happened with this man, Mr. Geno Smith. Geno Smith, for those of you who don't remember, maybe you're too young to remember, is in some ways your prototypical NFL bust. Geno came into the NFL, high expectations, and ultimately did not meet those when he was with the New York Jets. And he bounced around a little bit of a journeyman quarterback until he got to Seattle, sat underneath Russell Wilson. And when Russell Wilson moved on to Denver, the thought was, all right, so Seattle's clearly going to tank. And did Seattle tank? No, they most certainly did not. And here's what happened in 2022. We're looking at these numbers right here. We're talking a near 70% completion percentage, 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. He finished ninth in the MVP voting. He was the comeback player of the year. Ultimately, the turnaround underneath Sean McVay was immense, and he is widely regarded as the biggest reason why Geno Smith is the first quarterback. I love this stat right here. The first quarterback since Rich Gannon in 1999 to earn a Pro Bowl selection in their 10th year or later. That is a remarkable statistic right there. And so you look at that and you say, all right, so Shane Waldron has worked with Jared Goff, somebody who seemed like maybe they were a little bit of a bust. And I know Sean McVay gets a lot of that credit and deserves a lot of that credit. But ultimately, Shane Waldron deserves some of that credit as well. And then I think when you look at what happened in Seattle, it's hard not to look at that and say, no, that was clearly Shane Waldron. As Pete Carroll was more focused on the defensive side of the ball and being more of that kind of CEO type head coach. So let's talk about Shane. What are you getting in Shane Waldron? Well, if we take a look here at an analysis from a reporter for the Dallas Cowboys leading up to one of their games, one of the things they noted is this is a team that the Seattle Seahawks use a lot of pre-snap motion and a lot of play action. If the Bears were to bring in Shane Waldron, you're talking about going from being arguably the most run-happy offense in the NFL to being the most pass-happy offense in the NFL. That would be an interesting dynamic. I think some Bears fans would be excited about that. I think others might hear that and say, yikes, that's a huge shift in identity going from being run-first to being pass-first. That doesn't mean that's what Shane would do. It's possible Shane's doing what he has to do with the players available to him. One thing that I think is notable, if we go through, the Seattle Times did kind of a mid-year grading for their players. We got a B- here for quarterback, we got a B+ for running back, B- for receiver, B- for tight end, but that offensive line, C-. That was clearly the weak link, and it's entirely possible that Shane was looking at his team and saying, you know what, I don't feel comfortable running the ball behind this line. It's a possibility. Granted, the Bears had a terrible offensive line last year, and they still managed to run the ball successfully. So, there's a little bit of give and take. Why is this interesting to me, though? And it's not just because Shane shouldn't be available and is. What caught my eye here is this signals there is a possibility that I and many people reporting on the Bears have been completely wrong about what the Bears are planning to do with Justin Fields and the number 1 pick. I do not think you bring in Shane Waldron for an interview and not ask him about how he revitalized Geno Smith's career, and then ask him, what could you do with Justin Fields? I think that's entirely on the table. I think there's a chance they want Shane Waldron precisely because they don't want to reset the organization. Shane Waldron not only might be a candidate because they want to retain Fields and they want to see if Shane can take Fields to that next level, but also Shane comes from that Shanahan-McVay coaching tree, which is the same coaching tree that Luke Getsy comes from. And I think it has to be mentioned that there would be a possibility of more continuity here. And so that was a word that, I think Bears Twitter has kind of latched onto and made fun of as a poor excuse for not firing Matt Eberflus. But if that's the true aim here, and you are planning on trying to figure out how to just build on the momentum and not restart, it would make sense to bring in somebody whose offense speaks a similar language, maybe not the exact same language, but very similar language. So there's less of an adapting phase for the offensive players. And so, as I look at this, I say, this is interesting. I think it's entirely plausible that the Bears want to at least explore the idea of, can Justin Fields be salvaged? And why not? He hasn't shown enough thus far to make anybody believe you can win because of Justin Fields. But with the right coaching, could he? That's a fair question. I think it's a question that a lot of Bears fans have already been asking. And I think it's a question that Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren and Matt Eberflus are going to be asking Shane. I really do. I think they want to know, do you believe Justin Fields has it in him to not just be a quarterback you can win with, but a quarterback you can win because of? Because you can win with a quarterback when you have the cap space to surround them with talent. But once you have to pay a quarterback starting quarterback money, and you cannot allocate as much money to the players around him, now all of a sudden you need that quarterback to elevate everybody else. So the question to Shane Waldron is, can you make Justin Fields that quarterback, and what is your plan to do that? So, as with all things, we want to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. I thought this was an interesting tweet that came out from Diana Rossini, who mentioned that she was talking to an NFL general manager who said, remember, teams are putting out / leaking who they are interviewing, but there are always candidates on the list you won't know about yet. There are names not being released. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. It's something that we want to keep in mind. This is the time of the year where everything is a giant smokescreen. Don't believe everything you read. Don't trust what you're reading. The Bears can come out tomorrow and say Fields is our guy, and it can entirely be a ploy to try to get more draft capital in return in a trade. They can come out and say Fields, or the number one pick, is not on the market, and it could be because they want to drum up more interest to get more in return for a trade. Don't trust what you read from these sources. You never know. It always tells you something, but you can't just take it at face value. So anyway, that's enough for today on Shane. There are plenty of other candidates out there. Again, please leave in the comments. Let me know, who would you want to see the Bears bring in next to interview, and what kind of questions would you want to ask them? So, as always, bear down.